Hey friends, I'm RSKT. I made this design in Affinity Designer a little while ago, and it seemed to be really popular. I've got it up on my Etsy store as stickers and t-shirts that you can buy, and it seems to be like my most popular design. So I figured it'd be a really good chance to make this my first YouTube video where I break something down and show you the process of how I went about making it. I do use Affinity Designer for this just because I find it really suits my workflow, being able to switch back and forth between vector and pixel art. So feel free to sit back, relax, and just enjoy the process. I do start off always by just sketching out a rough design by hand. I kind of just find like I've got a little bit more creative control over how it flows out of my arm, so to speak. So yeah, just really rough dots and lines before I bring it over to the program and start lining everything up. Then I take like a really rough brush and just start sketching over the whole thing so that I've got a lot more detail to work off of when I start switching to the vector design. Just using a circular shape here for the middle, so that I know that everything I do is going to be lined up and nice and circular. Sweet, so that's the rough design done. Then I just switch over to like a nice thick vector brush and I start doing the outline. I always like to make the outline of my illustrations nice and thick. Or like the main bulky parts like arms and legs, or in this case tentacles, and then switch to a smaller brush when I go in and add all the detail. It just sort of helps the viewer understand like what big important shapes are and what little fine details are meant to look like. Sweet, and now I'm switching to like an even smaller brush just for like all of the tiny little details. So I'm just using the pen tool here, or you can use the pencil tool, and underneath on a separate layer I'm just blocking in big shaped areas that I'm going to use to colour in later. These are really useful because they're actually going to act as clipping masks when I start painting in detail. So I'm slowing it down a little bit here, but here's a really good example on the middle shape. Now that I've got this circular clipping mask, I can pretty much paint with a pixel brush anywhere I want, and just start sort of doing some really complex shading techniques and just progressing from like dark to light. I'm not really worried about like a light source or anything, but that's kind of what I love about this program, is that I can get some real creative control over doing vector artwork and go up and fix up all my designs with the pen tool, and then come in and almost act like I'm in Photoshop and start digitally painting in the whole thing. I used to do this with Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop, but I found it really finicky to switch back and forth between the two programs. So yeah, it just suits me and I really like doing it this way. Whenever I'm doing shading, I always like to put down a darker color on top of whatever my clipping mask base is, just to sort of muddy it up and sort of grunge it, and then start bringing in the highlights over the top. And for the highlights, I try and use contrasting colors, like I've used the blue on the edges here, and then a sort of lighter pink in the middle, so that all of the original purple parts that I laid down sort of appear in the background and look like something's sinking into it. Now I'm just using the pencil tool here and just roughly outlining, like picking out little details and stuff and adding them as like a shadow layer. They're all pretty flat, but I'll switch the blend mode to multiply afterwards so that you can still see the detail underneath them. And it just sort of helps some areas stand out before I start adding in the highlights to really make it pop. Cool, so now I'm just coming in and adding some highlights. I kind of only like to sort of space them out. I keep them in nice tight little lines, like little rows. If you go overboard with this process, it can start to look like the whole thing is wrapped in cling wrap, but just putting like little tiny shiny areas really gives it that wet look and can just make the image really stand out. And just repeating that entire process for all of the little suckers on the tentacles. Doing some quick color correction here just to get the colors the way I like them before I start on the center and start turning this pearl into an eyeball. For the eye, I basically just put down a flat factor shape and repeated the process I've done for the shading with everything else, but this time I tried to sort of focus things towards the center and the edges, like kind of the same way I would paint hair, so just layering up different brushes and different strokes and sort of putting down like little fine lines and then picking out darker areas with a big brush and just rinsing and repeating the process until I had something that looked semi-realistic. Now I'm just working on the highlight on the eye. Kind of like experimented a lot with this bit. I didn't know if I wanted to make it like a flat highlight like the rest of the Octopus. In the end I went for like this faded gradient look. And then just threw on like a bunch of different adjustment layers and played around with some different effects just to sort of make it look a little bit more dynamic. Wound up with this cool half blue, half yellow eye. I don't know why, I just really liked it. I thought it stood out in a cool way. Yeah, here I'm just sort of jumping back a little bit. I noticed that some of the tentacles didn't line up properly, so I just cut out the head, repositioned it a little bit, and did some light error correction of just filling in those new spaces that I created and adding on a little extra bump in this tentacle over here. Cool, so Affinity Designer's got like this little vector preview outline thing. So here's the big reveal. Yeah, I think it turned out like pretty cool. I threw on like a lens filter at the end of this as well, just to sort of tie some of the colors together a little bit better. And that's my process for like a lot of my artwork. I do plan on making some more YouTube videos in the future. I've got a lot of old artwork with time lapses I've recorded, like this one that I plan to upload first. But in the future, I'm really trying to plan out some proper tutorials that everyone can follow along to and teach people how to draw and how to paint in the same way that I do. Just show everybody is capable of being an artist if they truly put their mind to it. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below and I'm happy to answer them. Thanks.